Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council. I am Councillor Paul Ekpenyong, Chairman of Mid-Suffolk District Council, and I will be chairing the meeting today. Before the meeting commences, I would like to welcome Councillor Austin Davies, Ward Member for Thurston, to his first Council meeting. Welcome, Councillor. I'm sure you will all join me to congratulate him on his recent election. Secondly, I'm sure, like myself, many of you would have woken up to the news that, sadly, the Russians have invaded Ukraine. And I don't know about all of you, but I'm a very peaceable sort of person, and I think that's a very poor move on the Russians' part. So I'd like you to join me, if you would, in basically showing solidarity with our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. Thank you. Now I'd like to remind you of some domestic arrangements. Toilets are situated outside the meeting room, opposite the stairs. Cold water is also available in the breakout area outside the meeting room. If the fire alarm should sound, and we don't expect it to, please leave the meeting room by following the fire exit signs and meet on the Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch. Do not re-enter the building until you are told it is safe to do so. Please switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting, you are also consenting to being filmed by the Council and to possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph, or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. All right, with that, I will now move to the agenda. And item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Gould and Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interest by councillors. In accordance with the delegated authority, the monitoring officer has granted dispensations to all members in respect of the 22-23 budget papers. Are there any other declarations of interest? No. Thank you. So we will now move to item number 3 on the agenda. This is paper MC/21/24. Someone got a phone dinging. Okay, so item number 3 then. Paper MC/21/24. This is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January 2022, and it's for accuracy only. Are there any issues with accuracy? Councillor Geek?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sorry, I'm getting so short-sighted. I have to pick my computer up. There was a section in the half-yearly report on Treasury management, paragraph 55.8. It says that I gave my opinion that an investment was likely to get a poor return and perhaps it should be rethought. This isn't right. I didn't give my opinion. I mean, those who know me know that I don't have opinions on such things. I drew members' attention to the opinion of the risk management part of the officer's report. That was on page 52 of last month's papers, paragraph 8.2, where it said that the likelihood of poor return on investments is probable. So I was drawing attention to somebody else's opinion, not giving my own opinion, and I would be grateful if it could be changed.
We'll take care of that. Any other points of accuracy with the minutes? If not, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Mayor, and a seconder, please. Councillor Haddingham, thank you very much. I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the vote, which will be by a show of hands. So All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you all very much. We will then move to item number 4, which is the leader's announcement. And I would like to invite Councillor Morley to present her update.
Good evening, councillors. We of course have an important matter of the council's budgets tonight to debate, and so I will be brief. As leader of the council, I would also like to begin by congratulating and welcoming our newly elected councillor for Thurston, Councillor Austin Davis. I had the pleasure of meeting and...
I'm sorry, Councillor Morley. Could you speak up a bit more, please?
No, that's about as loud as that's going to get, I'm afraid. I'll start that paragraph again, though. As leader of the council, I would also like to begin by congratulating and welcoming our newly elected councillor for Thurston, Councillor Austin Davis. I had the pleasure of meeting and welcoming Austin at the Count last Thursday, and I now formally welcome him to the Mid-Suffolk District Council and our chamber. Welcome, Austin. Next, I would like to thank all of you, our staff, and the wider emergency services who rose to the challenge of the succession of storms last week. Fortunately, we're not as badly affected by those storms and related flooding as some other parts of the UK, but the impact was still felt by many of our residents. I was one of them, as were several other councillors, having lost power for 24 hours and overnight into Saturday. Our teams helped fight the elements to ensure our residents were supported and kept safe. This included our building services team, who provided emergency cover, helping our tenants in need on Friday and over the weekend, and our public realm team, who created 2 rapid response teams with officers out and about dealing with fallen trees. Thank you also to all of our officers that responded to our request to provide emergency support over the weekend. There were more volunteers than required, and your selflessness and flexibility is truly appreciated. Thank you. This week, of course, we have had the government's announcement about the lifting of remaining COVID restrictions. We already had a draft transition plan in place that is being reviewed in light of the government's announcements. This plan means that all of our existing internal arrangements will remain in place for now, but that we will be safely moving to more normal working. Councillors may also have seen that on Friday last week, judgment was handed down in relation to Thurston Parish Council's judicial review of our planning committee's decision. Officers are currently reviewing the judgment and considering next steps, so there is nothing further I can add on this tonight, but there will of course be further engagement with planning committee members shortly. Sticking with the theme of planning, I know councillors have been awaiting the outcome of the planning peer review that took place before Christmas. The draft report from the Planning Advisory Service was unfortunately delayed due to COVID-related ill health. We have, however, now received this report, which has been fact-checked by officers. I am pleased that discussions of the recommendations and the development of a relevant action plan can therefore begin shortly. As always, councillors will have directly received and seen the various press reports that have been published by the council since we last met, all of which are also available on our website. I will therefore not spend time repeating them all here tonight, but as it is currently half-term for our schools, I did want to mention how proud I am of the activities we have on offer for our younger residents of Mid-Suffolk, including football, swimming, crafts and outdoor cooking. Similarly, I did also want to say how pleased and proud I am to see the opening of the new library in Needham Market and the 9 new affordable homes in Bottersdale. These 9 affordable rent homes are made up of 2 and 3 bedroom houses, a 2-bedroom bungalow and 4 one-bedroom flats, with air source heat pumps installed as the primary heating source in the houses and electric heating system in the apartments. We are literally building great communities with bright and healthy futures that everyone can be proud to call home, and I couldn't be more excited about it. Finally, and sticking with the theme of exciting opportunities, you will all have seen that Suffolk was successfully named as one of the 9 Pathfinder county deals in the Levelling Up White Paper. This success came following 2 delegations with Whitehall, led by Councillor Hicks as leader of the County Council and by me as chairman of the Suffolk Public Sector Leaders. Unlike in other parts of our county, we are and will continue to all work together, collectively between the district, borough and county councils, to secure the best possible deal for the residents and communities of Suffolk. It is early days in these discussions with government, but there is an ambitious timetable to agree deals by the end of the summer, so I will continue to keep you as engaged as I can in this process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Okay, I guess there are no points of clarification. We'll move on to Councillor Mellon. So you're seeking a point of clarification?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Morley, for those words. I just had a quick query on one point that you mentioned, which is the judicial review in Thurston. Since there's a potential award for costs against the council arising from this case, has the scale of those costs been included on our risk register?
Councillor Morley?
As I said, we are looking at those items, and I have nothing further to add at this time.
Okay, so we move on to item number 5, and that is to receive notification of petitions in accordance with council procedure rules.
Thank you, Chair. None received.
All right, we'll move to item 6, and this is relating to questions by the public in accordance with council procedure rules.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And so we'll move on to item number 7, questions by councillors in accordance with council procedure rules. I refer you to the question in the tabled papers. I would like to invite Councillor Mellon to ask his question.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, I believe it's for Councillor Brewster. When will the future use of the former NatWest Bank building in Stowmarket be confirmed? Thank you, Chair.
Question, Councillor Mellon. The Council have agreed key terms with the John Peel Centre for a new lease, and each party's lawyers are working on final matters which are likely to be concluded within 4 to 6 weeks. And alongside the lease negotiations, the Council has previously agreed to fund repairs to the roof, and we have appointed a consultant to carry out a final assessment and prepare a tender specification for the work. It is likely that the work will be tendered within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and works will commence once a contractor is appointed.
Thank you, Councillor Brewster. Councillor Mellon, would you like to ask a supplementary question? Please go ahead.
I would, Chair, thank you. Can I just say how glad I am to see Councillor Brewster back on his feet after his recent illness. I'm sure we all welcome that. But I do have a supplementary question. Councillor Brewster was featured in the East Anglian Daily Times in March 2019, saying that this vacant building at the heart of the town will enjoy a new lease of life and give local residents a new and exciting community space in the heart of the town. So my question is really, why has it taken 3 years to get from that point to this point? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Brewster, would you like to respond?
Negotiation going on, and the lease is the one thing that really held it up and will be holding it up, I suppose, in the future. But But yeah, if two groups can work together, then I think that speeds things up.
Thank you, councillors. We will now move to item number 8 on the agenda. This is paper MC/21/25, Overview and Scrutiny Committee Report. I would like to invite Councillor Wellham to introduce paper MC/21/25, which is for noting. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I don't intend to be very long because I think the meeting is going to be long enough anyway. Just a couple of points I'd like to draw members' attention to. You'll have noted on page 7 at 1.2 that a more strategic approach to scrutiny of budget preparation is planned for future years. Also, that there was a concern that some aspects of financial scrutiny may be falling through any gap between the role of scrutiny and the role of audit. This has been looked at by the monitoring officer and the Constitution Working Group. In respect of the HRA budget scrutiny, members felt that further information to enable benchmarking against other authorities will be useful for future scrutiny. The committee also resolved that the number of tenants in receipt of rent rebate should be given to assess members' consideration of council rents for 2022-23. So perhaps this will be covered by Councillor Whitehead in his presentation of the budget. You'll also see that Mid-Suffolk Overview and Scrutiny Committee debated the call-in of a decision by Cabinet in respect of the taxi licensing policy. Committee resolved to refer the matter back to Cabinet for reconsideration. Page 11 of the papers lists the observations to be considered by Cabinet when they next debate the policy. I'm happy to try to answer any questions on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wellham. Are there any questions for Councillor Wellham? Okay, Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. I note what Councillor Wellham said about the financial scrutiny in the appropriate way between the two committees. But the recommendation was that the monitoring officer and Constitution Working Group actually look into this. We're 5 weeks down the line. I'm a member of the Constitution Working Group. I wonder if we can have an update as to when a meeting would actually be called so that we can start looking at that process fairly quickly, please.
Councillor Wellham.
Chair, I haven't heard any timescale for it, I'm afraid. I'm looking about me to see if the monitoring officer is here or if the Chief Executive can give any view on the timescale.
Arthur.
Yeah, Chair, I'm not aware. Emily's not here this week, but we will. I will send her a note to make sure that that's on her work plan.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wellham, for that. In scrutiny's deliberations with regards to the timing of scrutiny of the budgets, has the ONS committee, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, considered a budget process that will include community consultation in the budget, setting of the budget? Thank you.
Councillor Wellham.
Yes, it was mentioned during the debate, and Councillor Whitehead was there at the time, I think, and I think Councillor Whitehead more or less agreed that that is something that can be considered for next year, whether earlier scrutiny or a longer period of scrutiny, rather than just scrutinising at the last minute. There will be time for that. Thank you. I have pushed it. Is there anybody here, or do I repeat it? No.
All right. Indeed. Councillor Guthrie.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually speaking on behalf of Councillor Fleming because she has a voice that's not too secure. Would that be correct? So these are her words. Is the new statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards, which local authorities will be expected to implement, are designed to improve consistency in the licensing system, reducing the risk of harm posed to children and vulnerable passengers. Given that the standards have been set directly to address the safeguarding of the public and the potential impact of failings in this area, the importance of thoroughly considering these standards cannot be overstated. It is not a question of box ticking, the standards must be considered rigorously and with an open mind. New standards to improve safety for taxi and private hire.
I'm sorry, Councillor, have you got a question?
Oh, I thought you said I could read this. No, I thought...
Well, we're only allowing questions at this point.
Oh, I
Sorry.
beg your pardon, sorry. Oh, I'm ahead of myself. I was given the nod and the nod is not
Okay.
appropriate. The question is, may I speak later on behalf of Councillor Fleming?
I think only if you have a question.
No, later.
Oh, right, yes. Okay, so are there any other questions for Councillor Wellham? Okay, Councillor Wellham, do you have anything else to add to your report?
No, nothing else to add. Thank you very much, Chair.
That, members, that report was for noting only, so we are now going to move to item number 9. Item number 9 are recommendations from Cabinet/stroke committees. So, it is my intention to allow up to 2 questions. We have a very big agenda today, so it is my intention to allow up to 2 questions per councillor and allow up to a maximum, in total, a period of 30 minutes for questions for each of the committee reports that we're going to consider this evening. So please bear that in mind when we come to question and discuss those papers as we move forward. We'll then now move then to item 9A. This is paper MC/21/26. Councillor Guthrie, could you thank you. So this is, just to start again, MC/21/26, the general fund budget for 2021 and /2 and 4-year outlook. I would like, so as these budget reports are complex items, I am minded to allow the proposer of the report and the proposer of the amendment up to 10 minutes to introduce their items. Please note that the deadline for submitting amendments to the budget papers has passed, and there can be no further amendments submitted during the course of this evening. I would like to invite Councillor Whitehead to introduce paper MC/21/26 and to move the recommendations in the report. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a real honour and privilege to present my 7th consecutive Mid-Suffolk General Fund budget to full council. Now, over these years, we've delivered outturns significantly ahead of budget, and whilst one driver of that has always been additional income, we should also acknowledge that in building up the budget, department by department, we've perhaps layered caution onto caution. So for this new budget, 22-23, management has been pushed to use stretching but realistic assumptions across both income and expenditure. We should therefore anticipate going forward an overall outturn position being close to budget. Time will tell. As well as setting the annual budget, we do our best to forecast a 4-year outlook so that we can bring a longer-term approach to align our financial strategy to our medium-term 6 corporate strategic priorities. Now, we're not helped in this approach by central government, who for the 3rd year have provided only 1 year of certainty in their local government settlement. Budget preparation starts in the summer, and by mid-December, most of the hard graft behind our budget work has already been completed. And then just before the Christmas break, we are finally told our local government settlement. And surprise, for the budget, suddenly there was an additional 971,000 of income compared to what we might have reasonably expected. Clearly, it would be churlish not to welcome this money, but almost invariably, we must first put that money, additional money, into our reserves before any new detailed spending plans can be established. Chart 4 in the report at paragraphs 4.27 show the government grant allocation is 749,000 higher in 22-23 compared to 21-22, and that includes a very generous new homes bonus. Now, although not included in this budget, we are now drawing up some exciting spending plans for this additional money. More on that in a minute or two. We are faced with uncertainties beyond 2023. We still don't know how the government's waste reforms, which we largely support, will be funded. We still don't know how or when business rates will be reformed, although we feel it is inevitable. There there is undoubtedly a need changing because, accelerated by the pandemic, where any reforms could have a dramatic impact on our finance, as the government has moved away from its previous idea of 100% retention by local government. Of course, we still don't know about the new homes bonus replacement. So these are just three major examples that demonstrate the uncertainty and volatility of the environment in which we operate. But despite all that, I have increased confidence in our financial situation, even with such levels of uncertainty and risk. That's just how strong a financial position we have been able to create. Now, last year we had something of a windfall of income in terms of surplus funds that had not been budgeted for. We were able to utilise that windfall, topped up by other budgeted reserves, to invest 5.1 million directly back into our communities. That investment will be spent over this and next year. Now, as a further sign of our confidence, we will not be increasing council tax this year. We will be freezing our share of council tax. And due to the current higher rates of inflation, this does represent a significant real-term cut. The growth in our council tax base rate as a result of new housing means that our total council tax collection will still grow by 4.47%. Now, when I introduced my first budget 7 years ago, I hardly dared dream that 7 years later, our council would be in such a strong financial position. Robust reserves, very healthy future projections, and the opportunity to now freeze our share of council tax, despite this uptick in inflation. And I have a sincere desire that such a freeze can be extended beyond this 1 year, but we will see. The idea 7 years ago that we'd be in such a position to now freeze council tax, yet still be able to put aside over £5 million to fund an array of special projects as we emerge from a COVID pandemic would have seemed surreal, a sort of financial science fiction. But we can, and we are. On top of that, we even have such a surplus in store that our opposition can dare to venture their own amendment to use 820,000 from the Growth and Efficiency Fund on an electric bus project, which is clearly close to their heart. I said earlier that we're in the process of drawing up our own exciting spending plans for the near £1 million of extra money that's come from the local government settlement. And we want to bring these to Cabinet at the earliest opportunity as fully fledged and deliverable initiatives. We want to really help those residents that are struggling the most. So I'll just give you a brief flavour. We intend to uplift our regular communities grants. We'll significantly increase our councillor locality grants. Our officers are already investigating how we can help our local food banks with financial and other support. And officers are also looking into how we could provide free, means-tested EPC service for energy inefficient properties in our district. So that's exciting further use for our Growth and Efficiency Fund, which is not included in the budget report before us today, but the plans for which are being worked on now, so reports can come to Cabinet as soon as possible. So we truly have ambitious plans, which are only made possible by our financial strength and the hard work we've put in over the years to get us to our current position. As always, I must acknowledge all the excellent work of our finance team. They are truly the best. And at this time, I want to particularly thank Catherine Steele, our soon-to-be retiring Section 151 officer. It really has been a joy and pleasure to work with her over these many years. Her contribution to Mid-Suffolk District Council has been immense. Thank you, Catherine. So I'd like to now move the recommendation to approve this general fund budget for 22-23 with its freezing of our Band D council tax. I would ask for a seconder. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second, and I reserve my right to speak later.
Thank you, Councillor. I would now like to invite Councillor Field to propose the amendment from the Green and Liberal Democrat group. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, 7 years, a long time. I didn't realise it has gone that far. However, you'll find our amendment detailed in item 9A. It has the figures there and a number of bullet points, but I will talk about it a little. Obviously, our hope is to assist you with your problem surplus and help you dispose of a substantial sum, a single large idea rather than has been perhaps our tendency in the past to produce a number of smaller ideas which frequently are not adopted. So this amendment seeks to address the transport problems experienced by segments of our population who can no longer drive, have never learnt to drive, are temporarily unable to drive, are unable to afford a car, who choose to use it, not to use a private car to limit their contribution to climate change. It proposes that Mid-Suffolk provide but retain ownership of 2 small buses and the necessary rapid charging infrastructure to use in scheduled services by a community service provider. Routes will be chosen so that they do not compete with existing providers. By addressing these needs, the Council would spend a not insignificant but manageable, considering the surplus we have, amount of our budget. It would achieve very significant but perhaps less measurable benefits to the economy. It would help the numbers of residents who constantly ask us why are the bus stops recently installed never being used. Emissions from transport form a large percentage of the UK total, and to limit climate change we must reduce these. A return to greater use of public transport and a transition to zero carbon transport in the form of battery-powered electric vehicles is essential. Currently, our rural population has little option but to use private cars, petrol or diesel powered, but with a rapidly growing portion of electric vehicles. Public transport is sparse with few and infrequent service. In proposing this amendment, we are critically aware that the needs of Mid-Suffolk's largely rural population are less easy to solve than those in an urban setting. Our ageing population finds the need to get to shops, medical, financial support and leisure facilities that boost their health challenging and in extreme. Those most in need tend to be less able to use internet services as an alternative to physical travel. Our proposal will provide 2 zero-emission minibuses to operate a defined scheduled service on a network of routes to link communities together to service critical locations. It's vital that the service is understandable and therefore used by the target clientele. We should establish scheduled, low-cost, perhaps £2.50 a trip, or free services to complement and enhance demand-responsive services provided by suppliers such as BS-EVC. We're proposing that the Council should work with the County and BS-EVC or another appropriate operator to operate and establish a service similar to but more extensive than the County's Catch service, which operates in the Campsie Ash area. Knowledge should be drawn from that service and other established community bus services to ensure that accurate cost estimates and effective service parameters can be established. I would ask you to support the amendment and improve access to a range of services and activities for a challenged section of our population in a way which is fully compatible with Suffolk's zero carbon environmental ambitions. Thank you.
Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very happy to second this budget amendment, and I'd like to reserve my right to speak. Thank you very much.
Okay, okay. Councillor Whitehead, do you accept this amendment?
Yes, if I may say just a few words. I thank the opposition for their proposal this year. And as Councillor Field has explained, it clearly isn't an alternate budget, but as a suggested addition to the tabled budget. So I am prepared to accept the opposition amendment. I'm happy to ask officers to draw up a detailed viability plan setting out the business and social value for this project for Cabinet evaluation. Our officers have an excellent track record in obtaining grants and or match funding for projects such as this, so I'm sure they would relish the opportunity to reduce our own outlay on the project. The accountant in me tells me that capital items can sometimes be better leased rather than purchased, so further investigation of that aspect is also clearly needed. So in accepting this amendment, I do so in the hope that the opposition will support the budget and not vote it down. Because if they now go on to vote down the budget, their main achievement this evening will have been the creation of the shortest lived electric bus project in history. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Right, councillors. So, given that that amendment, oh, hang on. What? Oh, sorry. I need to ask Councillor Morley whether she also accepts the amendment. My apologies, Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do accept that.
Thank you so much. Right. Okay. Right. So, given that the amendment has been accepted, and given that the budget papers have been through ONS overview and scrutiny, various other committees, group briefings, and the like, I would like to consider that we move directly to debate, so we have much more time for that process. So, who would like to kick off the debate? Councillor Amorosan?
Will there be questions as well?
I beg your pardon?
Will there be questions as well?
Will there be questions?
Can they allow? Hello, sorry, Councillor. Yes, I've understood your question. Yeah, the answer is yes. But we're going to move to debate at this point. Who would like to kick off the debate? Councillor Passmore?
Are you doing, sorry, Chairman, can we clarify, is this questions or debate? Or are we doing debate then the questions?
If I can help, Chairman, I think the Chairman is intending to do both at the same time. So that rather than doing questions and then move on to debate, anticipating fewer questions, I think is what the Chairman is saying.
Indeed.
But if there are questions, then obviously, if you can indicate, because what we don't want to do is give an opportunity for people to miss their debating slot. But yes,
Okay,
I think
well,
the Chairman wishes to do both at the same time.
That's not a problem, thank you, Arthur. So I've got a bit of a hybrid job then, the first for Mid-Suffolk. So, now, one of the serious points on this, and I know it mentions about inflation in the report, and that's very, very important, bearing in mind the, I think, appalling approach of Russia and Putin and his regime invading the Ukraine. I haven't got up-to-date figures, but I do know mid-afternoon the price of various raw materials has shot up. And it's not just about gas and oil. If you look at the dependency there is for the whole world, for example, on they are the biggest exporter of wheat, precious metals such as titanium, palladium, and other sorts of things. I'm just concerned, I think it's a very, very good budget paper. I'm more than happy with the amendment. I just really wanted to pose the point that while some people may have looked at reducing council tax, nevertheless, if you look at the inflationary pressures that are likely to be well above what is put in this paper, I would just hope that our financial guru, Councillor Whitehead, is actually confident there is enough in the system there to counter the extra inflationary threat that we get. Because no doubt that will feed through not just to building materials, supplies, logistics, wage rises, of course, if inflation does indeed get up to the levels that some of us remember from many years ago into double digits, we're going to have one hell of a problem, and that will affect all public services just as well as everybody else. So I'm right behind this budget. I think it's a very good document. Welcome the amendment. I don't know if there's any chance of reassurance that we have enough in the system to counter with that renewed threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Passmore. Councillor Amorosan?
Thank you, Chair. I was interested in Councillor Whitehead's comment when accepting the amendment and his doubt as to whether our side of the council would be voting for the budget. And I was wondering why is there a doubt still in his mind that we might do that? So I'm just wondering, kind of cheekily, what are you hiding? I'm suspicious.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Otten?
Councillor Whitehead wanted to reply.
Oh, right. Councillor Otten, can I ask you to wait while Councillor Whitehead responds to those two?
Yes, sure.
Councillor Whitehead?
Thank you. If I may, I'm glad Councillor Passmore didn't actually point out that all my investments are shooting down at the moment, whereas everything else seems to be shooting up. But to answer the question, is there enough in the system given the inflationary pressures? And certainly there is a big worry about inflation, there's no doubt, even before the Ukraine crisis kicked off. But our four-year projections, despite the uncertainty that I outlined in my speech, there is such a surplus there already that I feel there is more than adequate cushion. We will shortly be seeing the Q3 outturn for this year, and that too will have a very healthy surplus compared to budget. So all in all, I'm happy that we've got enough in the system to cope for that. To the point with Councillor Morrison, the reason I may have had a doubt, I think, is just based on the track record of being in council here for 10 years, and I can't remember ever having a unanimous budget, and often, historically, it's even gone down to chairman's vote. So perhaps I'm being a bit cynical, and hopefully this is a whole new future of council living, and I look forward to having a unanimous vote on our budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Otten?
Yes, I would just like to reiterate what Councillor Passmore said. I mean, obviously the budget you've got here in front of us is the financial situation that we have at the moment, and obviously a lot has happened in 24 hours. So I'd be interested to know at what stage the administration will be looking at whether or not some of them quite drastic changes that have happened in these 24 hours, you will be able to reconsider your budget as it stands today. I mean, £100 for oil, etc., is going to be phenomenal, and it's also going to affect a lot of our residents. And just a very small item on your budget, I was quite surprised that, considering you are proposing a nil increase in council tax, you are proposing to put up the cost of the green waste scheme, which I thought we were trying to encourage people to use that. So I would have thought, under current circumstances and the financial situation, that was something you could have managed to not do this year.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if our budget was pretty close to break even rather than having the surplus it does have, then I would be more concerned. I think I was reading recently in the East Anglian Daily Times where Councillor Mellon was perhaps even suggesting we should have reduced council tax. And, well, I mean, that as a Conservative, that was sort of music to my own ears. But I think, given all the uncertainties, particularly the uncertainties of the last 24 hours, to move perhaps from even thinking about reducing it to keeping it level, is sensible. The green waste scheme, do you mean the garden bins? Yeah. I mean, my understanding of that is that the government, in a year's time, want to make that a free service, and we would lose like £800,000 of income or something if that happened. But I believe the government, for all councils, will, if they force us to make it a free service, they will reimburse us, what our losses are. So in some ways, the more we charge now, the bigger the figure that they'll reimburse us for years ahead, if we follow that. It's just, 1 year's increase might put a little bit more money in the pot, and then going forward, if the government forces us to do it as a free service, well, our residents will benefit, and we'll benefit from the more income. That's my thinking behind it.
Councillor Matheson?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, it'd be a pity if we didn't criticise anything at all. Obviously, I'd be disappointed for Councillor Whitehead. So, really, I think to some extent these are points for the Chief Executive as much as Councillor Whitehead, and I'm sure he'll speak to the Chief accordingly. Yeah, on the terrible war, the point was made very well yesterday already, that our dependency on petrol, on gas, on oil, is what funds the Russians buying their weapons, fundamentally, which is, I'm talking about just Britain, but more widely so. And I think that's, that tells us to redouble our efforts to move forward as fast as we can on renewable energy instead of climate change, fossil fuel. And just turning more to the detail of the congratulation, or the self-congratulation, which this side of the House does have a bit of a concern that each year's surplus does arise from under-delivery of some things. And just to mention a couple of them, really, that are the public's priorities that we all keep hearing about, or fairly regularly anyway, which is to say planning enforcement. Can we do more? Do we need more people to do more? Secondly, tree preservation orders. I'm told I can't get them. Can we please redouble our resources and with a greater ability to actually pass, put in place more protection of more trees? And thirdly, obviously, we don't look as if we've put enough resources in over the last 5 years? I can't remember now. Getting the joint local plan done. It's had another unfortunate setback, but I think that it should have been all done and dusted 2 or 3 years ago, frankly. So if we can put more resources into those public priorities, then I think that's better, and it's under delivery, as much as good work. Thank you.
Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. As everyone seems to be making comments about the Ukraine before they start, I'm going to make one. I find it completely objectionable that an orange-haired ex-president fool has come out today praising Vladimir Putin's invasion of the Ukraine as a, quote, genius move. I think what will get us through these current, very worrying times is truth and integrity. And I find neither of those in the comments of that gentleman. And I think we deserve truth and integrity across this House. I think we have an element of it, and I think we could do with more of it, frankly. I'm very surprised that Councillor Whitehead is so surprised that some on this side of the House are voting for the budget. We've done that twice in 7 years already. If you go and look back through the records, a majority of this side has voted for the administration's budget twice in 7 years. Because we agreed with elements that were in that budget, and there were things that were close to our heart that we wanted to get over the line. So we did it. We've worked with you. That's not a surprise. That's what we do. Twice. Out of 7. It's fine. Now this is likely to be a third time in 7 years. There you go. So, thank you for that. But of course, a budget is only some lines on a piece of paper unless you actually deliver it. And that's where the biggest concern is for this side of the House, of actually doing each year what we say we're going to do, and actually deliver on those estimates of cost, and actually deliver on those services and those wishes that we want to help our community be better than it otherwise would. That side of the equation is at times found wanting. I don't find it reassuring that year on year we put more and more back into reserves. I find that slightly worrying. It's worrying does it mean our budgets are then realistic? Yes, other outrageous fortune may help us with our finances. But I remember some other people that are in the same room over 7 years ago when we were given something called the Graph of Doom that clearly showed how our council was going to be bankrupt in a few years. And on this side of the House, we said, no. Governments are highly unlikely to not incentivise house building. And actually, that's proved to be quite true. And we've said it every year, I think for about 8 years now, and that has been borne out through. Yes, they could take it away tomorrow, but they don't. And they haven't. And what we should have done with quite a lot of that money was actually rocket fuel our communities, because the talent and wit that's out there among our communities is absolutely phenomenal. I've seen it rise together this weekend when we've had a number of people in a village near us that had their power out, and it was out for 4 days. On the second day, the village hall was open because it did have power, and there were people in there cooking meals for those people, charging their phones and making sure they could send the emails that they desperately wanted to do. That's what an inspired and well-connected community can do. Can you imagine what it can do if it had a little bit more funding? It could have had the solar panels on that village hall and the battery storage, which meant it could have still done that if that had had a power cut as well. So there's that element of, we've got brilliant communities out there. I will be supporting your budget this time because you've listened to this side, but we will be watching like a hawk to make sure you deliver. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Call on Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for your comments. Just a couple of quick points is that looking at the buses, one example that we have got, Councillor Whitehead, is the freighters, waste freighters, where, so, you know, there could be a similar situation where you use that as a business model, as it were, where you're purchasing the best and then contract out the actual service. And as others have said, you know, we'd want to see actual achievement, it actually happening this year. So we really do need to see that happen. And I think just a few comments that I'd like to make, if I may, and that, you know, I will be supporting it, but it depends on comments that are yet to be made from my friends and colleagues opposite, because I may be still put off. Just you know, be wary of comments you might wish to make. But firstly, if I may, I'd like to also echo Councillor Whitehead's comments about the officers, and particularly about Catherine Steele, if I may mention you by name. And I did comment that surprised she's not got the party poppers in for tonight as the last budget before she retires. But I would like to just say great appreciation to everything that you've done, and your openness to us all, I think, in any kind of questions and things is much appreciated. And as well to the rest of the team. And I just want to say that when we put forward proposals and ideas at this point in time, it's no reflection at all on the officers. We are wanting to put forward our group's ideas. We aren't saying in any way whatsoever that we think that the work that officers is doing is in any way wrong or whatever. We just want to say this is where we want to be heading, what we want to be doing. So I just want to make that clear. I think with regards to a few points on the budget itself, I'm disappointed really that there's not something in there about giving a council tax break. It's a one-off for households in dire straits at the moment, given the kind of rising energy costs. I know several members of, you know, all our colleagues have mentioned that so far, but I think that would have been good to see. I also am concerned about, in the report, it talks about stretching and asking corporate managers to do more. But it seems to be saying to do more as in get more income in, as opposed to achieving more for our residents. And what we want to see is more achieved. You know, we want to see more achieved for our residents, for our communities that we all are part of as well as serve. And I think I am still concerned that we are running this high surplus and we are not spending it. We haven't spent the 4 million from last year, which has gone up to 5 million. We've got another 3.4 million in the pot. So I'd really like to see that spent in this financial year and just actually do what we can. And please involve us. We have ideas and we're happy to put them forward, but we would like to see that funding spent. It's not our money, it's our communities, and we need to be spending it for them to improve their lives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Manson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to reiterate much of what Councillor Eburn's just said, but I do share her views completely, really. But I'd just like to say that isn't it lovely that we're in such a financially strong position? And is that just fortuitous, or is it by a plan? We have underspent several times in the last 7 years, every time maybe in the last 7 years. And please excuse me if I misremembered, but I was under the impression that the 4 million, or was it 5.1 million, that was agreed this time last year, I was certainly under the impression that that was to be spent during the financial year 21-22. But here we are today being told that it will be spent between 22 and 24. And we're adding yet more to our reserve budget. So, I agree with Councillor Eburn, and I was going to say it's lovely to hear that we're trying to ask our corporate managers to be ambitious about their income and expenditure, but what we really want them to be is to be ambitious in their delivery, so that we do get the services that we've delivered. And I also heard Councillor Whitehead say that there were lots of plans that would be worked on and be going to Cabinet in the next few months. And I really welcome to hear what those plans are to spend the money. And I just hope that it is not more jam tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Scarf?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I'm going to be voting for the budget. No surprise there. But I would like to point out, we pointed out at the Scrutiny Committee, there were some significant carry forwards. There's, I think, 583,000 just on housing. And we did have some concern that that might not be spent this year. So that is one thing I think that we will be watching. One thing that hasn't really been mentioned so far is the average staff vacancy rate. And this was drilled into by the Scrutiny Committee at some length. I think the last quarter performance report said it was 17%. At Scrutiny Committee, I think we were told it was an average of 9% when we asked what was the average. We now know it's an average of 12%. So to be ambitious and to deliver services on behalf of our residents in Mid-Suffolk, we do actually need to keep a very, very keen eye on ensuring that we actually have the staff to be able to fulfil those promises. Because without those staff, we're not going to deliver any of the schemes, perhaps. There is a potential there that we fail yet again. So I think that's something that I would ask that we look at very, very carefully throughout the year. I know Councillor Whitehead took that on at Scrutiny Committee, and that is something we'll certainly be looking at. In Councillor Whitehead's comments, he talked about the potential perhaps for securing grant funding towards the bus scheme. Well, that would be great, because if we did secure grant funding to the bus scheme, we could actually go further. We could provide more services for more residents of Mid-Suffolk with a fleet of larger buses. So 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. So I hope that if we're able to get in some grant funding, that we could actually look very seriously at expanding the scheme very much quicker, because our original idea was to start off with these 2 buses and then progress. But maybe we can go further sooner. And this is something certainly our side of the House would support, and I'm sure your side of the House will support too. So I welcome the camaraderie, if you like, that's broken out in the Council chamber today. I think it's absolutely wonderful that you've actually accepted one of our proposals. And I think perhaps the reasoning for that was that we came up with one proposal. We didn't come up with a string of proposals. We came up with one proposal, actually making it very easy for you and making it very hard for you to actually vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, Chair. I want to make a few points on the budget, but first I've got a point of clarification for the Chief Exec, if I may. It was just on the question of the 5.1 million. Is it the case that that's supposed to be spent within the current financial year? I just wanted to clarify that point.
Happy to answer, although I suspect Councillor Whitehead can do as well. No, it's not. So the original plan was that that money would be spent over a 2-year period, that 2-year period being the current financial year and the forthcoming financial year. So, in effect, be spent by March 2023.
Thank you very much to the Chief Exec for that answer. And Chair, if I may, I have a few points on the budget I would like to make. Although I have to say, after Councillor Eburn's comments, I'm quite nervous about doing so. I hope I shan't say anything too off-putting. I think first, just a general recognition that everyone has touched on is our relative financial position, which is a strong one, it is a fortuitous one. And I think that does give us that security, and I think it's worth reflecting on just what an enviable position we are in. So just by way of context, I'm currently on a LGA course at the minute where I'm talking through with fellow sort of cabinet members from other local authorities, and they are aghast to the kind of the flexibility we have. And what I do just want to reflect on is exactly how important it is that we do have both the diverse income streams that we do enjoy, but also that very sort of cautious control of what our spend is. And that's not just, I don't think it's necessarily, I'm no finance expert, but I don't think that's necessarily just an underspend of what we've allocated. I think it's actually a sustained effort to reduce our overheads over the longer term. So this building being a perfect example of that. Especially, and the reason I sort of emphasise that point is exactly as Councillor Whitehead said, that level of uncertainty and volatility given the national picture, and when I say national picture, I mean the national government settlement, I think is really important, whether it's the new homes bonus or the lack of certainty over the business rates reform. Having that strong financial position, I think, is really important. On the question of the council tax freeze, I definitely support that, allowing in real terms a cut for our residents in terms of the amount of tax they pay towards us. But also it ensures, as Councillor Passmore and I think Councillor Otten mentioned as well, a freeze enables that degree of future-proofing for the council's finances over the coming year when we know we're going to face inflationary pressures. We know they're going to be significant already, but after today's events, they may well get worse still. I think, finally, if I can make one sort of last point, it's just about what this then surplus enables us to do. And so I really welcome the comments that Councillor Whitehead made, both in setting out the additional community spend that we can make this year, but also in accepting the opposition's amendment. And I do have to say, I think I agree with Councillor Scarf that having a single sort of really tangible, detailed proposal made it far easier for us to see how we can accommodate that into the broader the six corporate priorities we have as a council. What I think this fundamentally does, this surplus and this financial position, allows us to go beyond what is fundamentally the bare minimum in terms of our statutory functions. You know, we don't have to be an organisation that just empties bins and maintains car parks. We can do so much more than that. We should be ambitious about what we want to achieve in the future, and I think that's what this budget delivers. I certainly, as unsurprisingly, and I'm sure Councillor Floutman would agree with me, if you want to spend more money on communities and wellbeing, I will never say no. So I'm delighted to support this and thank, of course, Catherine in her last budget for her contributions towards this and so many budgets in the past. So yes, thanks to all those involved, and Chair, I'm wrapping up now. I'll be voting in favour. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Davies, please.
Oops. This may not go down very well with the technology, I don't know. I also welcome, obviously, the freeze on council tax. However, I haven't had much time to look at the documentation in detail. So for our tenants, what are we doing to help them in a time of great financial squeeze? Are we keeping the rents on zero increase for them?
Councillor Whitehead?
Yeah, the way the council finances work is we have a general fund budget, which is basically everything except for the housing revenue account, which is like a ring fence, which is the cost of keeping our council house, operating our council housing. So the next item on the agenda is the housing revenue account. So we'll come to that in a short while. But we do want to do all we can in terms of helping our residents, and whether they're private renters, owners, or council house tenants, which is why we are freezing our council tax.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Wellham?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to talk about one thing, and that's about buses. The start of the work by the Task and Finish Group looking into rural transport needs and provision has been delayed, but we will be starting that work on the 14th of March. The head of passenger transport at the County Council will be assisting the group as a witness at that first meeting, and he has expressed his support for the work. This group will be producing recommendations, and these may well guide officers who will be investigating how best to serve our residents with the electric buses that have been proposed in the opposition amendment, which has been adopted into the Council's budget by Councillor Whitehead. This is a real opportunity for joint working of officers, members, the county, other partners. We can and should get on with this work. We should get on with it now. We need to get the buses out there carrying passengers as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Geek.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if the lack of opposition support for budgets in the past has been due to a lack of administration support for opposition budget amendments. I'm glad to see that I'm glad to see that the administration is now beginning to work with us, and I really hope that this will continue. Just a few details to share with you about buses to show how much needed this service is. In 2019, my village, Woolpit, had 7 or 8 buses a day in either direction. There are 8 westwards and 7 eastwards. In 2021, these were cut to 5 and 4 per day. Now they're 3 and 2. That's a catastrophic decline, and it means you simply can't rely on them. In particular, the 8 a.m. westward bus that got people to school at Thurston, college at Bayton, or work in Bury St Edmunds, that was the first one to be cut. And due to the decimation of the services, it's now practically impossible to use the bus as a main form of transport, whether you're trying to get to school or to college or to work, or even just to go shopping. And all this time we get more and more housing built on the grounds that there is a bus service in the village. Well, theoretically there is a bus service, but it's not one that's usable. Therefore, it's not one that's used. Therefore, there's no demand, and this vicious circle goes on. Please, can we all work together to break this vicious cycle? I don't know how many of you use buses in your daily lives, but I thought you might like some specific detailed figures from one village.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any others who wish to speak? Councillor Hicks.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of things on the buses. I think obviously we need to be aware that Suffolk as a county, we have applied for the Bus Back Better scheme, which will, if we're successful, will allow us to obviously run further buses around the county. That's sitting with the government at the moment to make a decision. And sadly, during COVID, we have seen, I think it's a 67% decline today in bus use compared to what it was before COVID, because people are still scared to get on buses and feel worried about getting on the buses. And of course, most of the bus routes aren't subsidised. They're private companies that are running them, and because users aren't using them, they're stopping to run the buses, which is a great shame. So I agree with Councillor Geek to some degree. It is a vicious circle of lack of use means that operators don't want to run them, etc. I don't want to upset Councillor Eburn at all, but I must say, as you would expect me to say, and obviously I welcome Councillor Stringer's comment, that actually the reason this is such a good, the reason, you know, we have a very, very strong track record on this side of the chamber is Conservatives. Conservatives are really well known for running budgets that are well managed, organised, and actually deliver for our residents. So I think it's absolutely fantastic that Councillor Stringer recognises that it's the Conservatives that are delivering a strong budget, and I'm delighted you'll be voting with us, Councillor Stringer.
Point of clarification. Chair.
I feel not,
really
Councillor.
not?
I feel
No,
not.
okay.
No, I'm terribly sorry.
Can I ask?
I'm sorry, Councillor Eburn, yes?
Can I ask for a point of clarification, please? Because I think there was some confusion between what Councillor Richardson mentioned on the 5 million and what Councillor Mansell said. Because at last year's budget, it was that, and I quote, that the budget proposals for 21-22, so finishing this financial year, would include 4 million of spend to be spent on investment in local economy, housing, wellbeing of residents, blah, 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 blah. So that was the extra money, as in between 4 million and 5.1, might have been over 2 years, but the original thing that we agreed this time last year was for the 4 million to be spent in this financial year. So I just want to make sure it's in the minutes if you want to look it up from last year's budget meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eburn. Arthur, do you want to respond to that? No. Okay, fine. Right, Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much to my colleagues, Councillor Field and Councillor Eburn, for their proposal on the bus thing. I'm very glad to hear that that's been accepted. But I'm also glad that we've been reminded that we did have a debate last year where 4 million was set aside and that was to be spent. And now we're coming to the end of the financial year, and I did ask Councillor Whitehead at the last meeting how much of that money had been spent, and I think he said it was something around about £250,000 would have been spent by the end of the financial year. We do, I think, welcome on this side the 0% rise in council tax. That is the key fact, I think, from this budget, that our communities are welcome and we welcome on this side. And of course, I will remind you that that was the proposal that we made last year. And of course, I'm glad that you eventually come round to our way of thinking. My concern with the budget, as I mentioned, is this issue of actually delivering and spending the money. So 4 million became 5.1 million, and yet we've spent only a tiny fraction of it. We have 500,000 set aside each year for the last 2 years for climate spend. We've only spent 59,000 of it. Allocating the money is the easy bit, and it's something that you've managed to do. Delivery and spending the money seems to be a much more difficult task. But I'm glad that you've taken on board what I think was a fairly modest proposal on this side of the House for these buses. Let's make it work, let's get it going. I do have a couple of questions just in clarification. And the first one of this, I wasn't sure entirely what Councillor Whitehead said, whether this would then come back to Cabinet and there'd be some sort of Cabinet veto on that. So I'd really like some clarification on that. And the second question is on the colour of the buses. Can we have one yellow and one green? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon, for that colourful end to your speech. Councillor Passmore?
Thank you, Chairman. It's really a point of information, I suppose. I would just ask people to remember that, of course, with the pandemic, it has been very difficult to get money spent. We all want value for money. I'm not using that entirely as an excuse, but just to give you some examples, some of the grants that we award from the PCC's office, we've had to via that over a period of more than the original time. So please understand that. The same has happened with capital investment for building programme that's been delayed for all sorts of reasons. A good challenge, of course, but please remember that. And on regard vacancies, in policing there are about 9-10% staff vacancies. I'm not talking about officer numbers. Sometimes we've had to fill those with agency staff, and that costs an absolute damn fortune. And it's very difficult to get people to apply, and I know this is being looked at about job evaluation or whatever the system is. So please understand, it's fine to say, yeah, we need to look at the staff vacancies and get them filled, otherwise what's the point of having them there? But it is a real challenge, and I suspect it's the same in the County Council, Health Service and everywhere else. So it's a big issue for us all to tackle. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Amoroson, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. A question for Chief Exec or perhaps an officer. Is there any mechanism in law or in council regulations that is able to hold us as a council to account for pledging, for spending our pledges within a certain time period beyond elections? Obviously, it's one way of doing it, right? But is there any other mechanism for that?
I'll try and answer the question. I think ultimately the answer to the question is all of you. So through scrutiny committees, through audit committees, through challenging the administration, and as you said, through the electorate, and at budget meetings in terms of the debate that you've had here tonight. So no, ultimately, you set a budget, you have to set a balanced budget. That's the only legal requirement. But you are then held to account by your electorate in terms of the success of delivering that budget.
Thank you, Arthur. Councillor Morley?
I have no hesitation in seconding this budget report. I want to start by paying tribute to Councillor Whitehead's doggedness and perseverance in being able to make freezing council tax a reality. I'm the first to admit I was not convinced it was possible. Normally, we stand here and tell you that we've managed to keep council tax to a minimum and that the Mid-Suffolk portion of council tax is only going to go up by the price of a cup of coffee per year. However, last March, we made the considered decision that we would attempt 0%. This administration's careful management of public money and the council's finances has put us in an almost unique position compared to other councils. Under Councillor Whitehead and Catherine Steele's careful stewardship, we have become one of the most financially strong and resilient councils in the country. We can see just how unique and important that is when we see other councils having to make cuts to services and staff numbers. My starting point is that it is essential that we have sustainable, best-in-class council services. That is a given. I want to thank Catherine Steele and her team for all the hard work they have put in. Catherine has been an exemplar Section 151 officer and public servant for Mid-Suffolk and Babergh for many years. And as this will be Catherine's final Mid-Suffolk budget before she retires, I want to put on record my personal thanks for her dedication and best wishes for her retirement. We have built our financial strength through a combination of additional income and efficiencies. We have made the difficult and often controversial decisions to invest in things like SIFCO, Mid-Suffolk Growth and Gateway 14, and to share services with Babergh and co-locate in Endeavour House. All of these combined means that we can invest for the long term and make the biggest possible difference to our residents' lives. As rewarding as it might be having a political disagreement in the chamber can be, I know that all of us stand for election because we want to make a difference. We want to make Mid-Suffolk an even better place to grow up, live, work and grow old. We want to make a difference to all our residents' lives and particularly to those who are least able to help themselves. So I'm most proud to second this budget, not because we're able to freeze council tax this year, not because we have more income than our current service costs, but because that means we can go so much further to help people. We have massive aspirations to support our residents and our business economy. We have already put in place over 5 million of additional initiatives to help over the next 2 years. And although each of these initiatives are time limited, it is my hope that these pilots will result in longer term strategies that can be built into the base budget. We also have other projects coming forward that are being worked on. These haven't been finally costed yet, but will run into many millions. And as always, we will look for external funding sources to match fund our investments. The Chief Exec often talks about trying to get the council to a position where we have more money than councillors know what to do with.
Councillor Morley?
But he always then caveats that with the fact that we will never succeed because we councillors will always find ways to spend that money. He's right. I want to end fuel, energy, digital and food poverty in Mid-Suffolk. I want to end homelessness in Mid-Suffolk. I want us to end carbon emissions in Mid-Suffolk. And I want to provide more genuinely affordable homes for our residents, greater employment opportunities and increased biodiversity. And I don't want us to stop there. I want us to do these things not for myself, not just because they are the right thing to do, because they are things that ultimately make an actual difference to the quality of people's lives. I commend this budget to the Chamber and I hope you will all vote to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Before I call on Councillor Whitehead if he wishes to add anything further, well, I'm pretty sure he does, I'd like to say a few words. First of all, can I say that it's been a useful and worthwhile debate, and I think that there's no doubt that across this chamber, we all want to achieve more for our residents. I have no doubt about that. And We might disagree about some of the approaches that we might take to that, but I can definitely look at my residents in the face and assure them that this council and its officers are working very hard to try and deliver the best that they possibly can for their well-being and the economic outlook that they can face going forward. So I would like to point out that in any organisation, of which, and this is one, ideas don't come from one particular group. We look for ideas from all sources. So let's not get too bogged down about where the ideas come from. Let's really worry about whether they're truly good ideas that we can set out good plans to implement that will benefit our residents. And as we know, we have some very core principles within our councils, and we're all working very hard to try and deliver on those particular principles. And I mean, I take the point that Councillor Matheson made, but we know we have a biodiversity policy, we have committed funds to it, we are absolutely keen to achieve the best sustainable outcomes in our district. So I have no doubt that we're travelling along the right kind of path. So I would encourage everybody to participate in this work, because it's vital that we are all doing that and that our residents see that we're all doing that. And with that, I'd like to pass the floor to Councillor Whitehead to round up.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been a very good debate, and maybe it's just that you remember the bruises more than the other times when it's come to these votes, but I shall certainly at some stage soon want to look back and just sort of see where the voting was, because sort of my recollection is perhaps it's wrong. One problem we do seem to have when it comes to like spending this £5 million, it's basically the capacity of the organisation. I know we can go outside and find things elsewhere, but I read more and more about the fact that there's something like 1.25 million vacancies in the country, and everybody, every company, private sector, public sector, just does seem to struggle to recruit. So that is a concern, because I think there's £5 million of projects, has to be like 14 fixed-term contract people that need to be recruited and are in the process of being recruited to deliver them. So there definitely are challenges with spending money, there's no doubt about it. But I look forward to this ongoing agreement across the council chamber. I'm not quite sure if it's supposed to be a sword's length apart or not, but anyway, I tend to keep my weapons at home. The only thing I'd just like to say, and it was really just to Councillor Mellon's suggestion that these buses are going to be running around Mid-Suffolk, so I'd be happy to ask Ipswich Town supporters throughout Mid-Suffolk whether they like the idea of the yellow and green buses. I must say that whether it's supporting the football, at election time, or even now when I wait for one of these new buses to come, I'll be saying, "Come on, you Blues." Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Right. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 19.3, immediately after any vote is taken at a budget decision meeting of the Council, of which this is one, the names of councillors who cast a vote for the decision or against the decision, or who abstain from voting, shall be recorded in the minutes of that meeting. The recorded vote will also be published on the Council's website. The vote is going to be taken electronically through modern.gov. I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the recorded vote on the motion.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue with the amendment showing as well. If you can cast your vote, please. Thank you. Okay, I can take, yep, 4. Thank you. And Councillor Pratt, I believe you've... 4. Okay, thank you. is a unanimous vote for.
Well, thank you all for that. It's now approximately 7 o'clock, and I think actually it would be a good point at which if we could take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Right, councillors, we're going to move now to item 9B on the agenda. This is paper MC/21/27, Housing Revenue Account 2022-23 Budget. I would like to invite Councillor Whitehead to introduce the paper and to move the recommendations in the report. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I needed that 5-minute vote to get over that. That 5-minute break to get over that unanimous vote. Every fibre of my being is sort of saying, "Quick whilst you're ahead." But I have to. Thank you. But the housing revenue account. I'd like to introduce this budget report. Now, the headlines in this housing revenue budget and the main proposal being voted on is undoubtedly the 4.1% increase in our housing rent. I'm sure all of us must have real concerns regarding such an uplift, given the other cost of living pressures that we know are in the pipeline for our residents. Government has for quite a few years now set out guidance and limits for the year-on-year changes to our council house rent levels. We had 5 years up to March 20, when we were obliged to reduce rents in each of those years by 1%, so a reduction of marginally over 5% in that period, which has been truly challenging for our housing revenue account. Since 2020, we've been allowed to increase by CPI plus 1%, which led to modest increases. But this year, though, inflation has moved far above the government's own target, leading to this proposed 4.1% rent increase. We expect to start the year 22-23 with HRA reserves of just under 3 million. And 3 million does sound like a decent-sized number, but with over 3,000 houses, it equates to less than £1,000 per house. In addition, even with this 4.1% rent increase, we're only anticipating a marginally above break-even position for the budget. So in this new year, we'll be adding very little to reserves. Yet I believe all of us on both sides of this chamber have great ambitions to improve our council house stock. Historically, we spent money on replacements to kitchens, bathrooms, doors and windows when they were needed. But going forward, that's no longer enough. We must look beyond that. Better insulation, improved heating systems and other measures to bring all our housing stock in due course up to EPC level of C. We make that investment and our housing residents gain the benefits in terms of living in higher quality housing. We simply can't achieve that with reserves of just £1,000 per dwelling. So this 4.1% rent increase, which is £3.42 for social rents or £4.99 on average for affordable rents, that will generate extra HRA income of nearly £6 million over 10 years. Now that is vital extra funding. You know, and our ambitions haven't been helped by the COVID pandemic, which has negatively impacted our housing revenue account. Our new build programme has been seriously delayed due to lockdown measures and social distancing, and our maintenance and repair programme has likewise been affected. The learning experience from this current year has been built into the budget expenditure for the next year, 22-23. That includes a 14% uplift on building services from this current year's budget to next year's budget. Now that on the face might seem excessive or overprudent, but the rather depressing reality is that this merely prepares the new budget on a realistic basis. There are still backlogs to be caught up, and there is without doubt a great deal of inflationary pressure on building materials and supplies. We are proposing to keep garage rents and sheltered housing services charges frozen at the current levels and making modest increases to sheltered housing utilities, but they will still include an element of cross-subsidy. As well as our clear determination to improve our current housing stock, we also have an ambitious new build programme. Now, COVID's delayed that, so we have a total of 21.5 million capital carry forward, along with 17.6 million of new capital funding. Over the next 4 years, we have identified development sites to deliver 341 homes, a welcome increase in our housing stock for those residents most in need of a new house to call home. I'd like to move the recommendations itemised in paragraphs 3.1 to 3.7 of the report and repeat a sincere hope that this housing revenue account also will have cross-party consensus. I'll ask the Cabinet Member for Housing if she will kindly second those recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second that and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We will now move to questions. And can we make sure questions are questions, succinct and to the point and about facts? You will have time in the debate to make other points. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, looking at recommendation 3.6, where if there's a budgeted surplus, it's going to be transferred to Strategic Priorities Reserve. I just wonder whether if over in previous years we've transferred quite a lot of money there, could we not transfer the odd million or two from Strategic Priorities back into the HRA?
Councillor Whitehead.
Well, my understanding, but I'll certainly ask Catherine to just clarify as well, is that that Strategic Priorities Reserve is within the Housing Revenue Account. That is the principal and the largest reserve, and that is there for improvements, etc. So, Catherine?
Can I clarify my question, Chair?
You have one more question, Councillor.
Yeah, so I'll let everyone else have a go afterwards. Yes, so just to clarify that, I was asking, that's a Strategic Priorities Reserve within the HRA, is it? I see. Well, what I was asking about was whether we can pop the odd million or two across from the general fund into HRA.
I wonder if Catherine Steele would just clarify that for the councillor, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. No, unfortunately we can't, because the HRA is ring-fenced, so the general fund and money that we raise through council taxpayers can't be used to subsidise the housing revenue account and vice versa. So unfortunately, no, that can't happen.
Thank you. Just to continue the theme a little, is it also illegal to, say, reduce the cost charge from the main budget and main revenue account to the housing revenue account for 1 year to allow us to waive the increase for just one time period?
Catherine Steele, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have to make allowance within the housing revenue account for overheads. You know, it has to pay for its proportion, and that is something that we have to talk to the auditors about when they look at the accounts. So I know the auditors would ask lots of questions if we didn't actually charge those overheads, and it is something that is rightly borne by the housing revenue account, because myself as an officer, I work equally across the general fund and the HRA, so part of my time, along with a lot of other things, need to be apportioned between the two. So again, I don't think that's an option in terms of not doing that overhead recharge to the HRA.
Thank you. Councillor Mansell?
Thank you. On a similar theme, are we allowed to loan money from our general fund to the housing revenue account at a low rate of interest?
Section 151, officer?
I'm not sure that there is actually any benefit, because we can get cheap money from the market, so I don't think there is any benefit. If there was such a transfer between the general fund and the HRA, it would need to be done at sort of market rate, so I don't think there is any benefit, and it's a loan, so it's got to be repaid. So if we were looking at loans for the HRA, then we would use the market rather than sort of internally.
Councillor Wellen?
Chair, thank you. I'm going to continue on the same theme. There are biodiversity improvements, I believe, planned for HRA land. Do they have to be funded from the HRA account, or can they be funded from the general fund? We've got £1 million to spend. Why don't we spend some of that on HRA land instead of it having to come out of the HRA budget?
Arthur, who's best placed? Catherine, if we could call on you again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just conferring with my colleague, that may be an area we could actually explore because some of our estates are a mixture of council tenants and private tenants as well. So, yeah, that could be an area that we could look to use general fund monies.
Thank you very much. Right, if there are no further... Councillor String? Okay, so we're going to move to debate then. So the usual rules apply, 3 minutes, and you will be timed. Who would like to kick off the debate? Councillor Matheson.
I will then. Right, I'd like to just thank colleagues for their sterling efforts in creative accounting there, which was eventually successful, we hope.
Is that it? No. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. Right, it's no doubt an evening for firsts. Right, just wanted to say about the HRA, it is galling the way HRAs are constructed. But of course, they've been constructed by something called a government, which means they're actually not quite fit for purpose. When we are hitting huge financial pressures, inflation, we are being asked to now raise costs for some of those that can least afford it, which is against every fibre of my being and against most of your political philosophies, allegedly. So surely, given the amount of lobbying that the administration is able to do as central government, we should be able to construct a way that this bizarre situation shouldn't occur. We've got a number of crises at our door. The debt cap has been lifted now, thank goodness, but surely we should be harnessing the value, the equity that we have in this housing stock to address part of the fuel crisis by having a huge programme of insulating our homes and bringing them up to standard. We have so much headroom in the value of this, we should already be doing it. So I won't be supporting the HRA, sorry to break the love in, because it is going to disproportionately affect those that least can afford. But why have we not got a position where we have got a government that recognises the crisis, allows that mechanism to happen within an HRA, to use that headroom to deliver 2 crises for the price of 1? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to keep it very brief. We understand the pressures in the housing revenue account and the desperate need to improve things like fuel efficiency and insulation and all the costs that go with that process. I think, as Councillor Stringer's just said, we are also very concerned, as I think Councillor Whitehead was himself, at increasing the rent on a segment of the population that can ill afford that. I'm also always concerned that we keep harking back to the period when the government insisted that we reduced council rents by 1% per annum. And as I recall that came after, well, for this council, after a debate where we put council rents up and we were told, don't worry about it, guys, nearly half of our residents have their rents paid for by the government through housing benefit. And the government is not quite as daft as we think it is. It responded. It forced us to back off, to reverse our decision. A decision that was obviously not just this council's, it belonged to a whole variety of councils across the country. So my concern is, if you like, twofold. We're building ourselves another problem with the government, and we're also hurting a particularly disadvantaged portion of the population. So I won't be voting for this, somewhat regrettably. There's a lot in there that is good and a lot of ambitions that we need to follow through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with both my fellow councillors on this side of the on this side of the room, and I just wanted to re-quote something that Councillor Whitehead said when he was talking about the general fund, and I have actually written down some notes which I probably can't even read properly, but I believe he said that he really wants to help those residents who are struggling the most. I think that were his very words. And really, I don't think increasing the council house rents is helping those residents who are struggling the most. And we've just had some examples of perhaps a little bit of creative thinking in our questions. So maybe there is another answer. I realise that there are a lot of pressures, and we do want to improve our housing stock. We do want to improve insulation. We want to improve energy efficiency to make it much easier for those people in the most who are struggling the most to pay their bills. But maybe we should be a little bit more creative and do it a different way. So I'm afraid I can't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morley.
I wasn't actually planning on saying anything to this paper, but given the comments that have just been made, I feel I do need to correct some misunderstanding. We already apply a 95% reduction to our council our social housing residents who are most in need. So stating that you can't support it because we're not giving help is just, quite frankly, not true. It is means tested, and those who are in need get a 95% reduction in this rent.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I dozed off, but could I just be reminded by Councillor Whitehead of the information that was requested by Overview and Scrutiny Committee, if he has it to hand. Now, we're asked to agree a zero increase in garage rents. We've supported a zero increase in council tax. Now, both of those will benefit to a greater extent those who live in large houses and drive cars. So we're not benefiting to the same degree the people who really need it the most, those who are living in the smaller houses, those who are living in council houses, and I think we should be favouring them, not favouring the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Passmore.
Just a very quick point, Chairman, if I may. Yes, we've heard that a lot of people do get substantial help with their rent. I'm sure we're all concerned about those who are in difficulty. That's very, very important. But don't also forget that the government has provided that £150 rebate for council tax overall as well for those, I think, is it band D or below property. So there is help there. The freezing the council tax, I do understand what you're all saying, but I think in this particular instance there is enough mitigation, and I shall certainly be supporting the proposal. And I do absolutely agree if we could have more freedom and autonomy on the HRA. I think those of us who've been here since the year dot have always said that, and I just think it's regrettable that government doesn't give you more autonomy for this, and there's plenty of other things as well. So that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you. We do need to be mindful that, yes, people who have been currently mean tested are getting that rebate. But you do have to be mindful that there are people in all of our wards, there certainly are in mine, people who are struggling with 2 jobs, barely keeping on the breadline, who are on doing everything they can because they do not wish to ask for benefits. They do not wish to be in a position where they have to live on handouts. And some of them are going where they are going without food to feed their children. And this is a case that is currently in the condition. It's going to get worse. This is what information that we're being given from the Instead of Ice. We are being given these by their situation is going downhill. And these are the people who everyone would say, these are the people in most dire need. And to be, considering there's been these properties which are, if they are in a condition band D, where they need to be better insulated, where people are struggling to pay for, either choosing to put food on the table or pay the heating bill, which we are in that situation at the moment now. Where we have all this addition, we have the people who, well, they are in dire straits, and they're going to be asked now, we can improve your home for you. We can put you in a better position where you're not going to have to worry about heating so much. We're not going to do it. We know that you currently don't have the money. You are already there, but to get there, you're going to have to pay for it. We're not going to say where this money is going to come from. Where can maybe climb up the magic money tree. It's not there. So these people are proud who have put themselves, their own health at risk by putting themselves not to go on these handouts. We're going to give them no other choice but to go on these government handouts. So either we're going to put more of the government at a greater risk, where it's going to go back on us, we're going to turn around and say, you've done this, what are you thinking about doing?
If you can begin to wrap up, Councillor.
Well, we know the situation, it's got worse, it's getting worse, and we're saying you can get out of it, we can improve it, we're going to make it greener, but it's going to cost you. That's not helping anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Scarf, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's a very small part of the overall housing revenue account, but I wanted to focus on the right to buy sales, and I accept that in the paragraph 4.25 we actually sold less than we expected to sell, but it's still houses that we lose, and for every house that we lose, we don't get to keep all of the money. And I think that is an absolute travesty. If the right to buy scheme worked well, it would enable our tenants to receive a discount and buy a house at a discount and allow us to use the full receipt from that sale to build a new one. And that surely has to be the way forward. And I think everything we can do to put pressure on the government to change that would be welcome. Paragraph 4.27 says the Council can enter into agreements with the Secretary of State to retain the full right to buy receipt from the sale of nominated homes newly built or acquired since July 2008. Officers will investigate opportunities to enter into agreements that any capital receipts received in future from the sale of those nominated homes could be retained in full and used as part of the 60% match funding required, because we only get to keep 40% of the original sale. So I would urge that the officers do that at the earliest opportunity, so that that small amount extra can add into the housing revenue account and can enable us to do things like retrofitting and more of the repairs and more of those kinds of issues. Because I think, although it's quite a small amount, it is still significant. If we don't spend the money within the 5-year period, we have to return it to government with a 4% above base rate payment on top. I've sought assurance in the past that we do actually manage to spend that, and I hope that we continue to do that, because the thought of paying the government back with 4% above the base rate on top is, to me, horrific. So I think if we can focus on that and get those opportunities to enter into agreements with central government to enable us to do more with the housing revenue account, I think that would be a good step forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scarf. Councillor Amoroso.
Thank you, Chair. So admittedly, I haven't got a great head for this kind of nuanced mathematics. However, I'm wondering if there is a potential paradox here whereby with raising inflation rates, it's going to bring so many more residents of council housing stock into qualifying for help with rent. And also, this additional rent increase will worsen their circumstances. And so, how many more residents are we going to be helping with their rent to pay this extra rent? So, is there a kind of where does the equation balance there? You know, and has that been considered? I guess. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Well, in the spirit of this evening's debate, I think, and the humour, I
Councillor, could you take off your mask so we could hear you better?
Sorry?
That's it, thank you.
Sorry, I'm speaking to myself. In the spirit of this evening's debate, I just want to ask a question, sort of a little bit of joined-up thinking, perhaps. I appreciate Councillor Whitehead's concerns about there's simply not enough income to meet the needs of our housing stock, to get our housing stock up to the standards that our residents deserve. I don't think anyone's going to argue the fact that our council housing supplies a very, very real need, and we want to do the best possible for our residents. Elsewhere, the council has borrowed £100 million to invest in council officers to provide income to the council. I'm not sure what the state of this income is at the moment, whether it's being paid or it's accruing. What Councillor Whitehead's problem, and the problem in the HRA account, is a lack of revenue. Rather than forcing an increase of rents on our existing residents, kind of suggests we actually borrow money from the Public Works Board, invest in new council houses which are energy efficient, and use that as a way of increasing the revenue in the HRA account. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Sorry, Councillor Geek.
Thank you, Chair. Given everything that the councillors opposite have said, it seems remarkable to me that anyone is liable to pay this 4.1% rise. It's so thoroughly mitigated. I can almost not imagine the kind of circumstances you'd be in to pay this rise. But as Councillor Amoroso suggests, it's also possible on analogy with the Laffer curve on tax cuts, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Keeping the rents down might not lead to a much lower income. And I think to be able to assess that, we need to hear the details from Councillor Whitehead on how many tenants qualify for the rent rebate, which, unless I've had a microsleep, I wasn't aware that we'd heard so far. So I'll await that with interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm afraid, Councillor Amoroso, you've already had your three.
Sorry, it's not a further question. It was just to point out that I did ask a question, and I expect an answer or not.
Well, I'm sure that Councillor Whitehead will respond to you when he gets up to speak.
Oh, thank you. I was just wondering if Councillor Whitehead wanted to speak first. But if everyone else has spoken, then I'm happy to speak. Anyway, I'd just like to say I'm very sorry that the loving is finished, and it seems that we're not getting the support from the other side of the chamber tonight. But anyway, we are where we are, and as you've heard earlier, the HRA is ring-fenced, and much as I'd like to transfer heaps of cash over from the general fund, that is not available, and our ambitions for energy efficient new builds that we can be proud of, and to bring our council stock up to an EPC level and above, unfortunately, is why we have come, with this rent increase and the rest of the HRA proposals before you. And so I'm terribly sorry that you're not going to support this. But anyway, I hope you can change your mind and really think about why we're actually doing this. And I do want to assure Keith that we're going to do all we can to spend the right to buy receipts that we can possibly do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Haddingham. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. I think everything I've heard, I very much sympathise with. I think might ultimately come down to the difference between when you're in administration, you have the responsibilities to make difficult decisions, and in opposition, you do have the luxury of voting against. And maybe if roles reversed, we'd be doing the same. But my understanding is this 4.1%. I can't say that every council's doing it, but I believe all the ones in Suffolk, whatever colour their administration are putting this 4.1% through. I'm pretty sure that everybody who votes for it does it with a heavy heart. But and in terms of the question of how many people are on benefits and get their housing support, I think I've heard figures from 45% to 60%. I'm not completely sure where it is, but somewhere around a half, perhaps slightly less than a half, or up to 60%. Either have full benefits paid or close to that. The lowest social rent we've got in Mid-Suffolk is, after this increase, is £50.96 a week, or £221 a month. And the highest social rent, £119.04, which is £556 a month, which, even the highest one there is, my understanding is that's significantly less than a private renter would pay for even probably a modest one-bedroom or two-bedroom flat in Mid-Suffolk. And if they're looking for a semi-detached house to rent in the private sector, they're probably paying, I don't know, £700 to £1,000. So it's, I think there'll be a lot of people look on those rents, and the reason there is a long housing list is it's, it is subsidised housing. It's housing well below market rent. So and we did say, I said in my speech, 341 new homes were proposing to deliver over the next 4 years. That's on a housing stock of, 3,200. So that's a decent number more. It'll take it up to 3,500 by 2026. I say, with a heavy heart, I shall vote for this increase, and because it is needed, we have to do it. It's a responsibility that I'm not prepared to shirk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Council, in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 19.3, immediately after any vote is taken at a budget decision meeting of the Council, the names of councillors who cast a vote for the decision or against the decision, or who abstain from voting, shall be recorded in the minutes of that meeting. The recorded vote will also be published on the Council's website. I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the recorded vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue. If councillors could cast their vote. Thank you. Councillor Pratt, can I take your vote, please? Yes, thank you. Councillor Warboys, are you? Oh, it's just come through. Thank you. Sorry about that. Chair, the votes are 16 for and 16 against. So can I ask you, are you exercising your casting vote?
I will be so doing.
Okay, can I take your vote, please?
That will be for.
Okay, so that is carried then.
Thank you. Right. MC/21/28, Joint Capital Investment and Treasury Management Strategies for 2022-23. I would like to invite Councillor Miller to introduce paper MC/21/28 and to move the recommendations in the report. Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. I am pleased to introduce this report, which we discussed at our meeting on the 24th of January. Under the SIPFA Treasury Management Code of Practice and the Prudential Code, both published in 2021, and the Department for Levelling Up and Housing and Communities Investment Guidance, published in 2018, we are required to determine separate capital, investment and TM strategy statements and prudential indicators annually before the start of each financial year. There have been no significant changes in format this year, and it has been updated to reflect the latest capital expenditure, investment and borrowing and the latest Treasury management investment and borrowing positions of the Council. The strategies and indicators to be approved are in the appendices to the report, and I will now give an overview of each of these. Appendix A, the capital strategy. This summarises the capital expenditure and financing requirements of the full capital programme for both General Fund and HRA, the details of which are in the budget report. This sets out capital expenditure and capital investment decisions and the associated risks and rewards, along with how risk is managed for future financial sustainability. It includes prudential indicators which demonstrate that the investment plans the councils are affordable, prudent and sustainable, and decisions are made according to good practice. It shows that capital expenditure planned for 22-23, including carry forwards, is 68.2 million, of which 52.6 million will be funded by borrowing. Limits and boundaries for borrowing are set as part of the prudential indicators. The strategy shows that projected borrowing will not exceed these limits. Appendix B is the investment strategy. This details those expenditure items in the capital programme that specifically relate to assets bought and or owned by the councils purely or partially to generate a return. This includes schemes which have the purpose of regeneration or development of the local area, as well as generating a return. In the context of this strategy, investments means those non-treasury management activities. The DLUHC investment guidance defines these as two types of investments. First, service provision, where the councils lend to or buy shares in organisations that provide a service, such as Gateway 14, for the purpose of regeneration and economic development. Secondly, for investments for yield, where the primary purpose is to generate a return, such as the council-owned company's SIFCO. This strategy explains how each investment contributes to the council's priorities and security, liquidity and risk. It shows the projected total investment of the council in SIFCO, the growth companies in Gateway 14, and planned expenditure on the council's property held, at least in part, for investment purposes. Appendix C is the Treasury Management Strategy 22-23, which sets out the council's borrowing requirement and borrowing and Treasury Management investment strategies. This also includes the list of approved investment counterparties and limits. There have been no significant change to limits since last year. Appendix D is the Treasury Management Indicators, which we use to measure and manage the Council's exposure to Treasury management risks. Appendix E, Economic Update and Interest Rate Forecast, the ongoing impact on the UK from COVID-19, together with higher inflation, the likelihood of higher interest rates, and the country's trade position post-Brexit will be major influences on the Council's Treasury management strategy for 22-23. At the time of writing this report, the authority's Treasury Management Advisor, Arlene Close, was forecasting that the Bank of England bank rate will rise to 0.5% in the first quarter of 2022 and remain at this level until at least the final quarter of 2024. Arlene Close has since revised this forecast and now expects the bank rate to rise to 1% by the middle of 2022. Appendix F, current investment and debt portfolio, shows the position at the 30th of November 2021. The borrowing for Mid-Suffolk is 132.9 million, of which 105.4 million is long-term at fixed rates and 27.5 million short-term. On the investment side, Mid-Suffolk has 19.75 million invested. This includes CCLA, UBS, Schroders, Investec and Funding Circle. We have continued the policy of withdrawing funds from Funding Circle as loans drop out, and we have not invested any new money. Appendix G, the Treasury Management Policy Statement, underpins the strategy and sets out the Council's regard to the monitoring of risk and performance, and the primary objectives remain security of capital, then liquidity, followed by return. Appendix H, the Minimum Revenue Provision Statement, which shows the basis on how we put aside the resources to repay debts in later years. Finally, Appendix I shows the institutions meeting high credit ratings criteria, and Appendix J is a glossary of terms. Now, I'd like to propose the recommendations as set out in 3.1 to 3.7 of the report, subject to tables 1, 2, 7 and chart 1 in Appendix A and table 2 in Appendix C being updated following the earlier amendment to the General Fund budget, and would ask for a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Muller. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Caston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Happy to second that and would like to reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Caston. We're going to move to questions. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was looking to see the extent to which our capital programme had been delayed by COVID, as I was accept it inevitably will have been. But the Table 1, Appendix A, that's on page 103, it doesn't actually show what the budget was for 20 to 21, or indeed for 21-22, the current year that we've got a forecast outturn. I can't compare either of those 2 years with the budget that was originally intended. I know that
Councillor
officers
Matheson,
can help me with that.
What is your question?
Yeah, the question is, can I see the budget to compare with those first 2 columns of that table? Table 1, page 103.
Thank you. Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson, for your question. Could I ask Catherine, please, to answer that question? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report isn't actually to give the performance against the budget. This is a different type of report, and the performance against the budget is included in the quarterly reports to Cabinet, because that covers both the general fund position and our capital position. So if a councillor wanted to see more information in terms of our performance against the capital budget, as I say, we have issued quarter 2 already, which was in December for Cabinet, and quarter 3 will be coming to Cabinet very shortly in March, so next month.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Muller, for your report. In Appendix C, under Environment, Social and Governance Issues, under paragraph 5.18, it says about how we will be just monitoring aspects of environment, social and governance, and the Cabinet will be looking at those. Could you tell me, how does that sit with the fact that in the paragraphs beforehand it says about we've declared a climate emergency, and the fact that when your committee made a recommendation to Cabinet, Cabinet then rejected that recommendation? So I'm unclear as to how that rejection of that recommendation sits with that paragraph 5.18. If you could clarify that for me, I'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Muller?
Thank you, Councillor Eburn, for your question. Yes, you're right, the Cabinet did initially reject that, but we have to consider all the aspects, not just the social, economic, etc. Perhaps Catherine still might be able to add any further to that. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So, Chair, I might wish to invite perhaps the Finance Cabinet member to make some comment, because there was much debate at the Cabinet meeting in regards to what was put forward to Cabinet from the Joint Audit and Standards. So you may wish to comment further on that.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead, do you wish?
Sorry, I've been stroking this Microsoft Surface up and down. It's quite happy now, but could you just tell me what appendix was that in, please? Because I'm Appendix C.
Page 135.
Page 1. Oh, right.
5.18.
Yeah.
And compare that against the statement in 5.13. And I'm just not clear about the monitoring, given that Cabinet rejected a proposal from the committee.
Well, my understanding, I'm struggling to, it's been quite a long day actually, but I think we were sort of taking a wider or more holistic approach to the whole thing, rather than, say, having a narrow focus on the climate change situation, to look at the whole environmental, social and governance side of it. But I think I might better respond perhaps outside of the meeting, because I'm not totally clear myself, to be honest.
Yeah.
Councillor Eburn.
Sorry, Chair, but if it might help if I clarify, because the statement on 5.18 says that Cabinet agreed to monitor, but I don't understand. I do understand, but I just would like you to give me some clarification how that works when we've got a committee called Joint Audit and Standards that makes recommendations, whatever they're on, and so therefore how is that, surely that monitoring is part of what the Audit and Standards Committee does. That's what I'm not clear on. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whitehead?
Right, I think it's almost coming down to some of the earlier things we talked about in terms of the Constitution, where things sort of fall between audit, between overview and scrutiny and Cabinet, etc. All I know from reading this and thinking back to the discussions we had back in January were that we wanted to monitor Treasury management over the whole spectrum of environmental, social and governance, and it is a very big spectrum. There's so many aspects of it, and certainly as a Cabinet that was our determination, but I'm struggling really to sort of answer beyond that, to be honest, at the moment.
Councillor Amarosian.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm compelled to raise the alarm, actually. I was part of that Audit and Standards Committee where there was a lively debate around this issue. There was disagreement, and after some discussion, there was near, if not absolute, unanimous decision that we should divest from fossil fuels. I want to read out from a think tank who do very rigorous studies on the...
Councillor, can you move to your question?
I've got a brilliant question. So they say adoption of renewables is growing exponentially worldwide, and disruption is now inevitable by 2030. They will offer the cheapest electricity option for most regions. Coal, gas and nuclear power assets will become stranded during the 2020s. And no new investment in these technologies is rational from this point forward. So I need to know why, as a council, and I feel like irresponsible being part of a council that is, why are we going forward with this? Not just from an ethical sustainability point of view, but from a purely
Councillor,
economic point of view.
Councillor, please sit down. Thank you very much.
Why?
So, at pain of repeating myself, if you're going to stand up to ask a question, I expect you to ask a question.
I did.
And I don't want war and peace beforehand, okay? You have plenty of time to have your war and peace when we have debate. And I don't feel that I should have to tell you to desist more than once.
Point of order, sorry, Chair, but I take reasonable...
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I have not given you the floor. Please sit down. Oh, okay. I just thought this was debate.
No, we were on questions.
Oh, I do beg your pardon.
Okay.
Could I have my question answered?
Indeed, we will attempt to answer your question, but if the relevant cabinet member is not able to answer it straight away, then they will have to answer it outside of this meeting. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Morley's just got me the sort of minutes, if you like, of the cabinet meeting where it was resolved that cabinet would monitor Treasury management in relation to all three aspects of ESG reporting as it developed. And the reason for that was to ensure the wider issues around environmental, social and governance are considered in relation to Treasury management investments, and not just the environmental issues raised by Joint Audit and Standards Committee. Yeah, I think, thinking back now, the Cabinet just felt that it's a very, very large and important field, a whole field of environmental, social and governance, and it was felt that the Joint Audit and Standards really had just focused very much on one or two strands of just the environmental side. So that's
Sorry, I can't accept
Councillor?
that. I've just brought up the economic argument.
I'm sorry, Councillor, you've had your question. Does anyone else have any questions? If not, then we will move to debate.
Right, fine. No one else wants to. I'd like to help Councillor Whitehead in answering Councillor Amorosan's question, and indeed Councillor Eburn's question, really. He said, and I have some transcript of the relevant part of that cabinet meeting, he based his belief that the fossil fuel investments would go up, not down, on gut instinct, and that's a quote.
If I could just respond and say that with Brent oil now at $104 a barrel, my gut instinct was pretty right, because I think at the time of the meeting in January it was somewhere around $70 a barrel, so it's actually gone up 50% in 2 months.
Very good point. Does anyone else? Councillor Amorosan, you have 3 minutes.
So, yeah, we're not looking at the spikes and troughs of the day-to-day trading fluctuations. We're looking at the investment trends for the next 10 years or so. And by all accounts, the trend for adoption of renewables in terms of investment is exponential, and the decline of investment in terms of traditional coal, nuclear, etc., is going to be exponentially the other way. So this is what I'm trying to get across to you. Let's not get distracted by short-term fluctuations when we know the longer-term trends, or we're relatively certain. Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I get your point. I'm not a financial expert and I don't do the markets very often, but I do know, like Councillor Whitehead said, it's not just peaks and troughs, always been continually growing. Of course, one day we'll stop using it, that's fine. What about when we get nuclear fusion? Should we not go down the nuclear route? That's kind of irrelevant. No, I'm not asking, I'm just throwing it out there. It's not irrelevant, it's as irrelevant as your points. The point is that they've decided in the direction they're going, and whether you think it's right or wrong, doesn't really matter, it's just subjective. It's your perception. And my perception isn't the same as yours. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Councillor Caston.
These investments that we're talking about, I don't believe, we're talking about the Schroeder Investment Fund, I don't believe there's an amount in nuclear or coal-fired power stations. It's a fossil fuel issue that we had. There's a proportion of that fund in fossil fuels. But I think the answer to your question, why has Cabinet not accepted this coming out of audit, is because Cabinet has considered it and not accepted it, just like because Scrutiny wants to force taxi drivers to buy electric cars, it doesn't mean that the Cabinet has to adopt it. What?
Could we allow the councillor his space, please?
So what I'd like to say is thank you very much, Councillor Muller, for all the work you do on this Audit and Standards Committee. He works extremely hard, as do all the councillors on that committee. We have big pieces of work put in front of us, and every single one of those people go through it diligently and with a huge amount of care, and it takes a lot of time. And I'd also like to thank the producers of this report, because it does arrive in a very good and well-written, competent way that that helps that a lot. So yeah, I'd like to thank those people, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caston. Okay, Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. I suspect, like many of the members across this House, I don't consider myself a financial expert, but reading through this report, I'm struck by a couple of things, and one is the paragraph 4.8, where we're told about the changes in the rules for lending from the Public Works Loan Board, and we've been very much dependent on that. We've borrowed money from that, we've invested it, and the government thinks so much of what we've done that they've changed the rules so that we can't do that anymore. So what we need to think about with these investments is that whether an investment yields over the short term is one thing. Whether that investment is a wise and a prudent thing and a far-sighted thing over the longer term is a different matter entirely. Investing in fossil fuels is creating chaos for our children and grandchildren. So unfortunately, I won't be voting in favour of this report, and the twists and turns of the debate that's gone on in audit and scrutiny, audit and standards, and then coming back to Cabinet, and the changes in direction are confusing for everyone. But a decision was made, and then you've chosen to overturn it. I think that the original decision was the wiser one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I move back to Councillor Muller to wrap up, I'd have to say that listening to this debate, I'm struck by the amount of confusion that exists. And that may be a consequence of the complexity of the issues that we have in front of us. However, I mean, if I read 5.18, I mean, it seems to me pretty clear. You know, it says that we're going to monitor these investments in relation to ESG, and we're going to report on that. And if we need to make changes to the investment profile, that's what we're going to embark on. Now, it seems to me, councillors, that actually this is something I've heard before. We have been round this loop in other council meetings. So I fail to understand why we're finding it quite so difficult at this particular moment in time. Having said that, I would also point to the fact that we are, as a council, very financially prudent and responsible in the way we approach not only the way we spend money, but the way in which we invest money. And that is evidenced by the amount of money that we've invested in CIFCO and the returns that the recurring revenue streams that is providing to this council. It is evidenced by our other investments, which are already beginning to bear fruit, and I can speak with authority as chairman of Mid-Suffolk Growth, where we're investing in council housing, and we're developing the old headquarters, and have built fantastic quality homes that, quite frankly, I've been amazed how they've actually flown off the drawing board, right? So not everything we're doing is bad. In fact, I think I would say in large measure, a lot of the things we're doing are very good indeed. And we're investing in Gateway 14 that is going to bring jobs and economic prosperity to this region, and we should applaud that. So I, for one, will be voting for this, and I would like to pass the floor to Councillor Muller to wrap up.
Well, thank you everyone for your sort of comments and questions, and thank you, Councillor Caston, for your comments, etc. Yes, this committee does work extremely hard, but I would also like to pass on my sincere thanks to Catherine and Rebecca and their team for the incredible work they have done. And I would say, like with an audit hat on, we have had unqualified accounts for a number of years, certainly since I've been co-chair of the audit committee, and certainly prior to that, which I can assure you from my previous experience as an auditor has not happened very often in the past, not here, but in other places I have audited in the past. So I would like to pass on my thanks to Catherine and wish her every best for her retirement, and thank you for all the hard work and advice you've given me over the last few years. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote will now, or should be appearing, is now appearing in blue. If you could cast your vote, thank you. Thank you, Chair. The votes are 16 for, 15 against, and 1 abstention. So that is carried.
That is carried, and we'll move on to Muller to introduce this item and to move the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
I am pleased to introduce this report, which we discussed at our meeting on the 24th of January. Our current 5-year external audit contract was let by Public Sector Audit Appointments following a national procurement, which the Council opted to join in 2016. The current contract includes the audit of our 22-23 accounts
and was let to Ernst & Young along with all the other councils in Suffolk. We now need to decide and let PSAA know by the 11th of March if we again wish to join the national procurement exercise to let a further 5-year contract, and this decision is a decision that only council can make. We discussed the 3 options outlined in the report along with their respective risks and benefits, which were to opt into the PSAA option, to make a standalone appointment, or to set up a joint auditor panel with local joint procurement arrangements. We are aware that there have been national issues with the timely completion of local authority audits in the last couple of years, but we supported our Section 151 officer's view that this isn't due to the national contract arrangements, and hence believe that we should continue to coordinate our efforts through these arrangements with other councils to tackle the challenges. The Local Government Association's view is also that the national procurement remains the best option for local authorities. Our recommendation, therefore, to Council is to continue to opt into the PSAA option, so I would like to propose the recommendation as set out in 3.1 and 3.2 of the report, and would ask for a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Muller. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Casson. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Happy to second that.
Okay. Are you reserving your right to speak later?
I don't think I will for this one. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Right. It's actually coming up pretty close to 8:30, and so I need to ask for an extension of the guillotine. This process? So if you are all happy for us to extend the time, hopefully it wouldn't be for much longer. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Right, well, let's crack on. Questions? Any questions for Councillor Muller? Okay, we'll move to debate. Anyone wish to kick off the debate? Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. How long have I got? I'm very happy to support the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Councillor Mellon for his support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue if you can cast your votes. Yeah. Chair, so it's 28 for and 1 against. Oh, 34, sorry, with the 2 not on the system. So 34, 1 against. Thank you.
Okay, that is carried. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. If I could refer back to last time's minutes, one of the answers to the questions was to say that the County Council are bringing together a range of stakeholders from across the districts to form a poverty board. This will help us to bring resources, understanding issues, etc., etc. So my question is, who is going to represent the District Council on the county-wide poverty board? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure. Councillor Morley? Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I've put my hand up because I think that was the answer I gave to the question that was asked. I'll need to go away and check and provide a formal response outside of the meeting, but I believe it will be an officer forum rather than a councillor-appointed body.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a couple of changes to the committee placings from our opposition group, and I understand that has to be done at the council meeting and ratified. So, on the Joint Audit and Standards Committee, Councillor Amoroson and Councillor Warboys will be coming off there. I thank them for their work on that forum, and Councillor Rachel Eburn and Councillor Austin Davis will be going on to that committee. Thank you, Chair.